Hey, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. It's been a little while, but I'm back. And what you were just listening to was an unfinished cue. If you've been to the channel before, you know that if I'm going to talk about something new, like a sample library or a tool, I like to kind of put it within the context of a living, breathing piece of music and not just kind of kick the tires and be like, this does that does that. So let's hear it in a cue. So let's just kind of dive in and talk about what this library is, and then maybe how I came at this cue, which is again unmixed, but some of the other pieces that make up the puzzle of this cue, other libraries and effects and all the rest of it. So first of all, Stratus is somewhere between a kind of sequencer, somewhere between a synth, a piano. I'm not really sure. It reminds me a lot of the Swarm instruments that came out from Spitfire in the last couple of years, but it's a lot more playable and tweakable, and kind of it's easier to get your kind of voice in there. Whereas Swarms are more kind of these kind of blooming, just big puffy clouds of sound. This gives you an opportunity to have some of that, but also kind of get more direct with the melodies. There's also a lot of room for kind of exploration and stuff. So, and by the way, the song that you're hearing is a kind of reimagining by me. It's a cover more or less of a song by a guy called M-Craft, and the track is called Chemical Trails. So that was just something that I thought would be interesting for this library to kind of reflect and cover with these tools and stuff like that. So the way that this works, now I don't want to go too far into how the plugin works or how the sample library works, because there's a lot of great videos out there. I'll just kind of give you my quick and dirty of it. You've got basically a number of notes that you can play here, and as you play them, the sound kind of refracts and you get these interesting polyrhythms. So right now I'm on the Matrix Rhythm Attacks section, and if I just put my hands down on some keys, you'll hear So you hear things kind of bouncing and looping and repeating. This is the whole point of the library. Apparently, Ólafur got into an accident and there was some nerve damage to his left hand, and he couldn't kind of be as expressive with it. And so he was looking at some, I think they're called player pianos, which are just kind of these pianos that kind of do things on their own. And he eventually built a system which allowed him to play a bit more fully, like he had his two hands functioning. And that's what's going on in this library, is that it almost sounds like you've got someone or a couple people playing notes that fit with what you're trying to do. And that is about all I'm going to say about this kind of grid and everything else. Again, watch the videos on Spitfire Audio's website. They're great. A big inspiration for me when I was coming up with this cue and trying to work my way around this library was a video that Home did, where she goes behind the cue that was in the trailer and how she wrote that. Anything with her, by the way, if you just see her face in a thumbnail, please click on it. It's the most no nonsense, to the point. Here's how I came up with this. Here's what I used. Kind of tutorial out there, unlike me, where I like to talk a lot and describe things. She just gets right to the point, and she's so talented and wonderful. So please go watch that video. I'll make sure I link to it. So we have at the top here this Matrix Rhythm Attacks, and this is what kind of leads the cue into, well, at the beginning anyway. So I'm going to just solo this so you can hear it. It's the main melody here. And then we have that boomy sub bass. This is also from the library, actually. So if I go down to track number 2 and I go into Contact, you'll see that I have this sub bass, which is from Stratus as well. And the nice thing about this library is they didn't just sample a couple of pianos that Ólafur had, they also sampled, I think, a couple of synths that he had, and they have built that in as individual patches or stuff that can work within the kind of grid matrix thing that I was showing you earlier. So the notes can kind of refract and stay in key and everything. And so usually when I'm doing these videos, I want to try and make the most of the library and see all the other stuff that it has to offer. And this is one of the great things about Stratus, is if you kind of go under the hood, you'll find a lot of great patches and things that mean you don't have to go to another library. You can have a kind of sonic consistency and stay in one kind of like, sonic palette, if you will. So we have the sub bass going, and I'll just kind of open up a track here to show you what it looks like when you open Contact and then go into Stratus. You can see the library. I usually just kind of reduce the window here so I don't have so much stuff. So I'll go over here and you'll see that we have advanced, but then we have these kind of basic patches. Drag this in and we're back to our kind of rhythmic waves here. I was using attacks earlier, but this is what this sounds like. So I'm just holding my hand down here. And it's going to be synced to the host tempo, which is 104 right now. Now, where I got that sub bass is I actually went into, let me just stop that for a second. I went into warps, and then you'll see in warps we have all of these really interesting little, I guess, like extra bits and pieces. And I think I got sub bass from, sub bass right here. And so you can just drag that in. We'll replace what we have. So that is a very quick kind of little tour into the kind of patches and articulations and things like that. And we also have, I said again, we have piano, but we also have some synth stuff, which we'll explore a little later on as we go through the queue. So now we have, I mentioned maybe in other videos that I love anything with Ólafur's name on it. And one of, I think, the best libraries that I have, and perhaps one of the best, if not the best library that I think Spitfire has released in the last couple of years, is Ólafur Arnalds' Chamber Evolutions. And this just works really well with what I'm doing here. You'll see that we have these first couple things here, the high melody piano, the sub bass, and then this other thing kind of comes in, which is this waves thing here. And I'm using this on not the longest, but the second longest articulation. And this just gives a nice kind of wave of strings that come in and then they kind of recede and go back. And it's just super, it just makes you sound like you programmed a whole bunch of things that you didn't program. And I love stuff that does that, that just kind of stuff that you wouldn't be able to do on your own, but people think that you recorded it somewhere and, you wrote a bunch of automation to make everything kind of like come in and then breathe and then let go. And anyway, that's one of the reasons I love this library, Chamber Evolution. So let's have a listen to that come in now with all the other things that we just talked about. So these go up to E and then down to D. And they just sound great on their own too. And then back up to A. And you'll see here I didn't do any dynamics or expression automation. These things, they just sound wonderful as is. Not to say that you can't go in there and tweak and give some life to them, but they have so much life already. So the next thing I have here is Cypher, and this gets back to the warp section of the library that I showed you earlier. So if we go over here to Contact, I'm just using a little guy. And this sounds like this in the actual track. Let's just solo these guys. Just to give it something else. Really simple. You'll notice it's not going to any reverb or delay or anything. All of the effects are kind of baked in here in the actual patch, and it just sounds wonderful. So there isn't really much to do. Next, we have these high mids, and again, we're back to chamber waves. Let's have a listen to these guys. And here I have a little bit of dynamics automation going on just because I felt that it needed it. I'm not on the longest patch here. I'm using tremolo, a little shorter tremolo, again, just to accent things a bit and give something for the ear to get excited about. It's panned a little bit to the right, whereas everything else is pretty much up the middle. That being said, these libraries are often, for example, for Stratus, you've got left hand and right hand, and it's pretty, it's pretty panoramic already. So to say that I pan certain things in certain ways, like, is kind of, these things are super wide, some of these libraries. So where I can, I like to move things a little bit more kind of forced to one side or another side. And that's also something to think about as your panning structure when you guys are working. Sometimes you'll hit the mono button, everything kind of collapses down because things are just so kind of wide. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, well, people listen to stereo now. I think, a couple like iPad now is stereo and everything's stereo, but you do have to be aware that if things are spread so liberally, when something does get played back on a phone or, in some other playback system, it might sound like trash. So one of the things I'd advise you to do is go to the quick effects here and just bring your stereo image in a little bit. You'll see that I kind of reined it in here. You can bring it out nice and wide to the sides, but I like to kind of just cinch it so that it's not so panoramic and we don't kind of lose focus. So I have that going on there. Chamber waves using the tremolo, one of the tremolo patches. It just sounds really nice next to everything. Here it all is kind of together. Comes out on the right. Next we have some support strings, and this comes from a totally different library. This is long flautando, again from Spitfire chamber strings. I just really like it. Sounds like this. Just really subtle. It's kind of quiet. And it's just giving some top end to this, which is pretty kind of low and low mid heavy. I just find that it kind of fills things out and gives something for the listener on the top end. Right, just up there. Next we have, I believe, almost the exact same MIDI support strings again, but this time we're just kind of in a lower register just to fill things out. This is where I get into trouble because sometimes I like to add on a little bit too much, and less is more, but sometimes more is more. That makes any sense? Right? And that just sounds great on its own, which is a testament, I think, to that library. Now, the next thing I have is a crescendo roll, and this actually comes from another library that's in fact newer than the one we're talking about today. And it's Leah Bertucci's, I forget what it's called now. There's so many friggin' libraries now. Where can I find you? I can find you in another track. If I go to contact, I don't want to change what I have here. It's the acoustic spaces one or something. Yeah, acoustic shadows. It just sounds awesome. I converted it to audio just because it's really difficult to deal with rolls in MIDI because you don't really know where things crest and where things peak and then decay. So I just moved it. I just bounced in place, and it just sounds really great to kind of introduce the next section of this cue. And I also think I added some reverb, or perhaps there was some reverb already in this library. It sounds wonderful. I might make a video on that too if people want to see one 5 months from now. So here's what it sounds like embedded in everything. So next we have these rhythmic wave pianos, low, mid, and high. And they just sound wonderful on their own. These come from Stratus as well. I went into, I believe, the advanced ones, and I just pulled out the rhythmic waves 16 long here. How do I find my way back to these guys? If I can't find them, I'm just going to not worry too much about this. Over here, yeah, 16ths, and then I just added long number 1. Just holding down a couple of chords. But if I play these notes in succession, like this, and you let it ring out, it just has a great kind of sound to it. And that was something I kind of copied from Home's video. She was doing a little bit of that. I don't think I did it as well as she did, but it's just to kind of give, I don't know, it's like a bunch of birds kind of flying around in unison, just kind of going and cascading left to right. So we have those in 2 kind of registers or frequency spaces. And that's one of those nice things about this library is that sometimes if you're playing polyrhythms like this, they'll kind of line up and then they'll separate and then they'll line up again and then they'll separate. You can hear that the transients are kind of linking up sometimes, and then they go back and they just kind of do their own thing. And that's not so much by design, it's more just random chaos. But again, it's the whole point of this library is that things are kind of refracting and looping in and folding in on themselves, then expanding, and that's kind of fun. So the next thing I have here are, it's a synth pad, and I'm just doing intervals here. This comes from, again, the Ólafur Arnalds Stratus library, Synth Swarm 6. What does this sound like? Very, very Kid A to my ears, Radiohead. A little quiet in the mix, again by design. If we solo them, they sound like this. They've got some dynamics automation as well. All right, let's keep moving. Graded keys. This is another one from the warp section on the library, and it just sounds really kind of twinkly, I think. Let me turn that up so you can hear it. Little shards of glass. Sounds really cool. Let me turn this back down. But again, it just gives us a little bit something interesting to hear as the track picks up momentum. Tinkles. What's accents down here? Is this another Chamber Evolutions? I'm just in love with this library. It sounds so good. Now, next up we have some percussion, which just welcomes the kind of meteor part of the cue. And one of them is a timp hit. I could have used anything, to be honest, but I'm like just messing around with the Acoustic Shadows library that I couldn't get on the Timp Rolls track earlier. This is it in its kind of full glory. It looks a bit like a Labs instrument from Spitfire. It just sounds really good. And then we have that combined with another thing that I got from Home's video, where she shows you how she came up with a cue for the library commercial for Stratus, and that's Albion 1's Easter Island hits. They just sound really good. I didn't know. I never really played much with the Albion 1 percussion stuff. Okay, here it is in the mix. Sounds a bit loud, but then once you get everything out of its, everything out of its way, it kind of meshes together really nicely. I don't know if I said that properly, but anyway, I'm a bit tired. Let's go to chamber grid accents. Just sounds like this. This is from the same Chamber Evolutions. There's a grid section to it, which sounds really great if you want to go gritty with it. And here's where we kind of go back into Stratus full tilt, and that's with these bleeps here, which sound really great. This is the synth part of the library that I was talking about. It's separated between some piano stuff, some sound design stuff, and some synth stuff. Turn that up. Let me get back to where I was before. Anyway, it sounds cool. It's a nice juxtaposition that works between the piano and the synth. You wouldn't think that they go together, but when you put them together in a cue, they actually kind of work together, which is kind of cool. Anyway, that's part of the synth matrix, which is, if I get out of advanced here, you'll see that you go to the synth matrix kind of section here. I don't know why this doesn't say piano matrix, but it doesn't. Anyway, synth matrix over here. And we were in the looped rhythms, and there's a whole bunch of them here that are anchored at either 90 or 120 BPM. And it just sounds really good, I think, as a different flavor and something for the ear that's like, oh, different. We were hearing pianos and synths and pads, or pianos and pads. Now you have a synth come in. Here's what it sounds like. The last thing I have here is another one from the library, and it's just a bit of an assist here on goal as we get to the end of the track, and some it's again from the synth. It just had a nice kind of pulsing polyrhythm that I liked to kind of bring things into a new area of the cue. I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with this guy, but it sounds like this. So that sounds like this in the mix. Anyway, all in all, that is a very, I think, practical guide to this library. Again, I didn't want to go too deep into every little kind of folder, subfolder, articulation patch, because video's a little, it's not old, but it's been out for a little while, so I didn't want to spend too much time going over what other people have gone over, especially on the Spitfire website. So I might work on this cue a little bit more. We'll see. It might turn into something that I'll put online, but thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of this. It's been a little while since I've made a video, so I'd love to hear what else you want to hear from me, because it's been a minute. And yeah, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you have this, if there's something I've missed in this library that I should really check out. I always find it's helpful to hear from people who have stuff and they give me a direction to go in or something. The Home video was amazing because I realized there was a whole other kind of world to this tool that I didn't know before. So I'm really happy I watched that video. And you should watch it too, especially if you're going to pick this up. Anyway, take care. Have a good one.